In this episode, we tell the money story of a beautiful couple, founding pastor of Nashville Life Church, Pastor Alvin Love II, and his lovely wife, who also happens to be the most decorated gospel singer of all time, 15-time Grammy winner CeCe Winans. I hope you enjoy it.
Let's get some money.
From New Money, New Problems, it's the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. Negotiating compensation, purchasing your first investment property, helping your family with money, the highs and lows of entrepreneurship. New money brings new problems that require new solutions. Join us as we work through them together. I'm Brenton Harrison, and this is the New Money, New Problems podcast. Hello, this is Brenton Harrison. I am your host of the New Money, New Problems podcast, where we believe that new money leads to new problems that require new solutions. I am so excited for the episode that we have in store for you today. This is a couple that has been very gracious to me over the years, been very kind. Their entire family is very kind, but they also have done some really, really cool things. So I'm going to introduce them and then I'm going to bring them on. I'm going to start with Pastor Alvin Love. Pastor Alvin Love II is the third of four siblings born to Alvin and Rose Ann Love of Detroit, Michigan. He attended Western Michigan University, where after 2 years, he joined the U.S. Navy, obtaining an associate degree in engineering. After serving for 6 years as a naval electronic technician, he left to join Xerox Corporation, serving in a variety of roles until 1995, when he began to travel the world with his wife, CeCe Winans. His time with her gave him a love for God and his people that led to his accepting the call in 2012 to become the founding pastor of Nashville Life Church. I can't call you Alvin, and I stick with Pastor Alvin.
Either way, man.
Thank you for joining the New Money, New Problems podcast. And now I will introduce your lovely wife. CeCe Winans, who I also know as Pastor CeCe, is one of, if not the most decorated musical artists of all time. She is the recipient of 12 Grammy Awards, 20 Dove Awards, and 7 Stellar Awards. She's been inducted into the Gospel Music Hall of Fame, the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the Nashville Music City Walk of Fame, in addition to being named a Trailblazer of Soul by BMI and garnering multiple NAACP Image Awards, Soul Train Awards, Essence Awards, and more. She sold in excess of 5 million albums in the U.S. And most important to this podcast, she was one of the defining voices of my childhood car rides wherever we were going. Thank you for joining the New Money, New Problems podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. And I'm so glad your mom let me be a part of the car ride.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If it wasn't you or Brooklyn Tab, the stereo was just off.
Brooklyn Tab, awesome. Love them. I was in great company with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you both for joining us. I know we're going to have an interesting conversation because you two are interesting people. And I'm interested to know, when I reached out and said, I want to have a conversation, and it's not as much about the career as much as it is the relationship with money associated with the career. Did you have any initial thoughts? What is he talking about? Like, how has that process gone?
Well, actually, talking about money is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. Maybe not in the depths of what you're used to talking about it, but because we knew you, it wasn't that far-fetched. It was like, okay, let's do this. So we're glad to be here, but I didn't have any initial thoughts against it or that I
think it fits in perfectly with where we are as a couple and as a family, because we're more conscious of our finances and how we can best utilize it and how we can best protect it going forward, than we have before. So I think it's a perfect time to talk about where we've been and where we're going and where, and all those things in between. Mm-hmm. And hopefully this podcast will help somebody to understand the importance of money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's go back to the origin stories. One of the first things I'm interested in is when you bring people together from two different households, they bring two different perspectives as it relates to money. So the first question I have for you all is, For each of you, when was the first time in your life that you recognized the power of money, a lack of money? What was your first exposure to the subject of money?
I guess if I go back to childhood, in our home, we didn't have a lot. We didn't have a lot. But one thing I can say about my parents, and I think it just carried on in my heart and in my siblings' heart, we knew money was necessary, but we knew life was filled with things that were much more important, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
The importance of money was never really taught. We just saw that, of course, if you don't have money, you can't pay your bills. And if you don't have money, you can't have a lavish lifestyle, But we were always blessed, as in the Winans household, to have what we needed. And we were always very grateful for that. But we saw how our parents worked really hard to have the money to take care of all of us. So that was probably my first understanding of, wow, they really work hard for money. But thank God they always supplied us with what we needed, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
My household in Detroit, we didn't have a lot of money. Go to school, inner city Detroit, we got by. We never went without food or clothing or shelter. But money wasn't really discussed a lot in our house. Mm-hmm. I think that probably is common with a lot of Black folks, I think, from what I've gathered from friends that I know and what I see. I think if we had a lot of money, I think there's more talk on it because you protect it. But when you don't really have a lot of it, it's just, they're living check by check. I didn't really become conscious of it because I went into the service. And in the service, you really don't have much need for money because they take care of everything. Your food was covered, your shelter was covered, you had insurance, you had medical. And so the money that we made just went into the bank. And it wasn't a lot of it, but because we had Uncle Sam who took care of us. It wasn't until I guess I got saved in 1982 that I really started to become more conscious of money because I started tithing. And then I realized how important it is to give back to God what he has given me. So that's kind of where my understanding of money really flowed from my childhood until then.
That's interesting. So you equate kind of your introduction to financial literacy with you finding Christ.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's powerful.
Because without it, you just living for yourself. As long as I was single, so as long as I had what I needed, I didn't think about the future or
other people.
As long as I was covered for what I needed. And that's the selfish attitude, that we have before we have Christ. Right. As long as I'm good, And, but being married, enjoying getting saved, that changed everything.
I was having a conversation with a friend and, obviously there's various belief systems and they have different rules, suggestions on giving back to the body. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a generous tither, and we were saying that in some ways, tithing is a budgeting exercise where you are trying to figure out, how do I take care of this part first, put it to the side and manage with what's left. So that's very insightful. You said something, you talked about Christ. You also talked about when you were single, and at some point in time, you were no longer single. So how did you all meet?
We met in a bowling alley. Actually, it was a youth outing in Detroit, Michigan. I was living in Charlotte, came home to visit, and Alvin was there, and we met there. But then, really, at our church, when we started talking a little bit, we went to he had joined the church, my home church, and so bowling alley, then at church. That's how we met.
Very nice, very nice. And early in your relationship, I know at one point you were both on the road together, but was that the case from the beginning of your marriage?
No, Alvin worked for Xerox sales.
Beauty school.
He was in sales, and I sang. And it wasn't until, what year did you start traveling with me?
1995.
1995, and you had been at Xerox for how many years? 19 years? Mm-hmm. Okay. And so then he came out on the road with me because up until that time I was traveling with my brother, BB. And so when we knew we were going to start doing solo projects, I felt like I needed somebody to be with me. BB was always with me, so I was taken care of. And he understood that somebody needed to be with me as well. He wasn't happy about coming off his job because he'd always worked, always been the breadwinner. And so when I asked him, I knew it would have to be something that the Lord would have to do in his heart for him to say, okay. And so he hesitated for a little bit, and then he decided to go for it.
It's funny because we're talking about money. This was a part of my career at Xerox where I went from being a service technician to sales. Mm-hmm. And started really doing well in sales to a point where she asked me to come off my job when I was at the peak of my performance. And so I was like, you want me to come off now? But it was ironic that God chose that time because he made me realize that it was going forward that he had me looking at and not looking at the past or the current situation.
Yeah. How long did those conversations last? I would like to say that I have no pride wrapped up in the money that I earn, the things that I can purchase. But there's some element of human nature, and there are conversations that if I describe it 5 years after the conversation with my wife, it was a conversation, but in the moment it was an argument.
No, it wasn't. I don't think it lasted that long. I mean, I asked him and he took a minute. And then he called me one day and was like, okay, I'm ready to do it. So I was like, okay,
Yeah, I think everything happened so fast because, when she decided to go solo, it wasn't something that really was planned.
Well, it was a
contract, but we didn't plan at that point. Said, well, I wasn't aware of it until she said, I want you to come go out on the road with me. But it made sense because, like she said, she was traveling with her brother. And she said, well, I need you to come out with me. I didn't think about what God had planned for the future. I was just looking at right now. I'm doing well at Xerox. I wasn't looking forward to leaving, but I knew that this was something that I needed to do and to travel with her. So it just worked out that way,
Yeah, I don't remember it taking that long.
It wasn't a long conversation. No, we didn't have.
I knew something that God had to speak to him on, and he did. Yay.
Well, to me, I think that's very interesting. And when I talk to people who are in the music industry or travel frequently, at some point in time with just the travel and trying to navigate money, you have to bring people you trust into the equation to manage it, to report to you on what's going on. What has that been like as you've navigated success?
Wow. Great question. We have been blessed. Let me see. I did it for quite a few years without a business manager. I shouldn't say quite a few years, but a few years. Let's just say a few years where we handled everything ourselves. And then when we came to Nashville in '89, I understood in order to go forward properly and to make sure everything was taken care of, that a business manager was needed. And so we've had a business manager probably since about that time, 89, 90. And so it was wonderful. It was wonderful. For several reasons. When we were both traveling, just the simple things of paying your bills and making sure your taxes are paid on time, because when you're traveling, that's what you're focused on. You're just traveling, and unfortunately, a lot of times you don't think about a lot of things you should think about because you're just so into the grind of doing what you do. So having a business manager was life-changing for us both. And at first it was funny because I remember when we first started talking about having Mr. Kirk Martin was his name, of Martin and Associates. We love him. He's no longer with us. He's gone on to be with the Lord, but was very, again, I can handle our own bills. I've always did this. I've done this and I've done that. I'm like, okay. And then finally, he went from that extreme to, I don't want to see nothing. Just send everything over to
I didn't realize how many different irons in the fire, financially, that was involved with her, because she had to pay her band, her singers, promoters, and everything that she did. I just took for granted that was handled, not realizing that somebody had to do that.
Absolutely.
And when it falls in your lap, looking for the checks on time, it became more than I had the knowledge of. So we had to definitely get a professional company to come in and handle all those things.
This is the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen. We'll be right back.
Are you wondering what new money problems you might be overlooking in your financial life? If so, we've got great news. We've crafted the New Money, New Problems Gap Finder to identify potential weaknesses in your finances in areas ranging from budgeting, investments, insurance, and even the threat your extended family's finances could pose to your household. Please head to newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to complete it today. Again, that's newmoneynewproblems.com/gapfinder to take the assessment.
You're listening to the New Money, New Problems podcast. Subscribe now at newmoneynewproblems.com. Welcome back.
Well, I am very intrigued. I can tell you that for myself, one of the biggest challenges of entrepreneurship has been determining my worth and determining what I'm going to pay others. And it is different if you're working, and there's difficulties in both. But if you're working for someone and you're negotiating a salary, there's a range. You can say you're worth $1 million. If they're only paying, $100,000 for the job, we got to meet somewhere in the middle. When you are an entrepreneur, it's really a matter of you deciding what you feel you're worth. How have you navigated that? Has that been difficult? Have you played the primary role in setting your appearance fees and things of that nature, or have you used counsel?
Definitely use counsel. I mean, when you're in the industry, there are ranges. You have some who make a lot more than you, but for what we do, you can definitely, there are ranges. You're dealing with promoters. It changes on if it's a church or a theater, or if it's tickets, or if it's a love offering. It just comes different ways, So, and a lot of times as ministers of the gospel, even though that's my career too, a lot of times we don't charge anything. We go. It depends on what it is. If it's a certain benefit, or nonprofit. So serving is always a part of it. But also when it's a ticketed event, or if it's a television, you have a range there. Television shows pay so much. So it's not just me saying, oh, I'm worth this and I'm going to charge this. I've never had to do that.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. And you talked about engagements that you do for free. I know that both of you have serious demands on your time, which is partly why I'm so grateful that you decided to join us. Even beyond money, when you discuss just time and the number of people making requests of it, have you come to an agreement on how you process what you say yes to and what you say no to? Is it gut feeling? How do you even navigate the schedules that you maintain on a daily basis?
Wow, that's a good question.
I think let me say this. I don't know if this will answer your question, but with CeCe, if someone says, I want you to come and I want you to just kind of greet our people and maybe say hello, sing a song, they don't realize that they're taking away a day, And so I think with her, it has to be something that has to make sense for that day, because when you block off a day to do something like that, you're also eliminating a possibility of a performance coming in, So a lot of times you got to navigate, do I want to lock this date in for something that's maybe gratis or something, maybe a love offering, opposed to a promoter coming in with a paying date, Also, she has to factor in that she has singers and band people who are dependent upon her making money so that they can make money, because if you don't keep those guys busy and girls busy, they're going to be with somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So we have to factor.
It's more than just me.
Yeah, so she's a business in herself because of the number of people who are on the downstream of her income, So people don't realize that when they call for CeCe, they're calling for 14 people. They're calling for a road manager. They're calling for a sound technician. They're calling for 5 band members, 3 singers, a manager, a booking agent, are all in that fee. So they said, wow, she goes for that much. Well, we got to pay a lot out of that.
What is the conversation when someone truly doesn't understand? Is it as simple as, well, thank you for asking, but we're not going to be able to do this?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we have people who take those calls.
We don't take those calls. Somebody else talks. Yeah.
I mean, there's people that I talk to who are friends of mine, and if I can make something, and a lot of times I want to make it, then I'll try to make it. But to your question, it's something that you always evaluate. It's not just a straight formula for it. Because again, we are people of God and we're people of faith, and so being spirit led is a huge part of what I accept and what I don't accept. But also looking at my time, being a wife, being a mother, being a grandmother, and we have a church. So it's changed over the years. Now I'm 57 years old. When I started out doing this, I was about 18. So I don't even want to be on the road that much. So now it's like, I don't even want to leave the house. So that's becoming very, very more specific in me leaving out, because it's wear and tear on the body as well. So I'm in a stage now where I'm reevaluating. I'm going on a tour coming up. I haven't toured in years. So I'm going to see, how many shows I can do. The promoters can come and say, hey, can you do 4 shows in a row? I'm like, absolutely not. I used to be able to do that.
40, 90 minute shows. Yeah, that's a lot of work.
But now you have to reevaluate that. So it's something that year to year, I kind of have to look at and say, have we spent enough time together as a married couple? The kids are grown now. So like I said, now it's my grandbaby, So different things I would do to say, okay, I'll be out on the road these many days, or I'll go overseas for this amount of time and that's it. Then I got to be back, So it's just a ongoing reevaluation, balancing act.
You brought up that balancing act and you mentioned the church. And that was where I was headed next. Okay. So the church started in 2012, or you became senior pastor in 2012. Tell me about that, because if I read your bio, let's say I'm not having the conversation, I read the bios, it looks like one was on the road, I joined, now we're coming off the road, we're going to do this church. And I mean, everyone I know who attends your church and just people who know you talks about how spirit led you are, how much they enjoy the church. What led to you accepting that call?
God made it very plain that that's what we were supposed to do.
I guess the long or the shorter story is back. If you go back to 95, is the first time that it was prophesied that I was going to be a pastor. But it didn't move me because I did not accept that, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. But as time went on from 95 until 2012, we must have had several people who would come up to us.
Several prophecies.
Some people we knew, words. Some we didn't know, who would come up to us and bring up our church. And I kept saying, well, why do you bring up a church? We don't have a church. And they would say, well, you will have one soon. And so, we started getting those kind of comments and feedback. And so in 2012, my son was really the reason why the church started, because he had gone to Australia. He found the Lord, came back home after about a year, and was really motivated to
share the gospel
with his friends. Yeah. And he started taking people to his house, and it got so many people that he started to ask them, can they come to our house? And that turned out to be 40 people who came to our house in November of 2011, which carried over to March of 2012, where we had 80 people coming to our house. And so we knew the prophecy had gone forth over me. The people were in my living room.
His eyes were open.
The living room, people were in my living room. The lady who was conducting the services asked how many people didn't have a church home, and about 40 hands went up. And she said, if you guys are interested in starting a church, come back to the house next week, and we're going to start a church. And that's what happened.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And now that church has grown. You're no longer worshiping in your house.
Oh, that was 3 months in our house. 3 months, yeah.
Yeah. It's been a great journey, but yeah, that's the way it happened. It was something that was not on our radar. Nothing we ever desired. We've always been, I grew up in church. Alvin got saved later on in life, but still he was a part of a church. And so have been blessed with great pastors and great people. I have nothing but fond memories of church. but just never thought that was our call. And it was very clear that God had different plans for us and for our son, for our family to start a ministry in making disciples. I've been in ministry for years, but being in ministry on the road and being in ministry at a local church is two different things.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
In so many ways, but it's amazing.
Now that you're in a different phase, you're not traveling as much. You have the church. Your son, Alvin, is now senior pastor of that church. When it relates to your spiritual life, your financial life, and the things that you're most looking forward to now, where do you find yourself? What are you focused on in that area?
When you say finances, to me, both Alvin and I have always been very unconcerned about money in a way. I mean, we're both very simple people. We don't have to have a lot. We understand the beauty in just having a great marriage, having peace in our home, having food to eat, and having the Lord in our lives, But it's been several years now that our focus on money has changed because we want to give more.
Yeah.
We really want to. We've seen the beauty in giving. To be able to be generous in our giving has really been the thing to motivate us to get our finances in order. So I would say giving first, and then we had our grandchild. And then the scripture comes to say, leaves a heritage for your children's children. It's like, oh, we got to get things in order. So that's the greatest motivation.
That reminds me of a story. Our previous business manager, Kirk Martin, he thought that if we gave money to anybody, he would consider that tithe. And so when we started telling him, when some of the checks become larger, started coming in, and we said, Kirk, we got to pay 10%. He said, well, didn't you give so-and-so some money, and didn't you give that? So we had to really educate him.
Don't play with my tithes now.
We had to educate him because, he didn't quite understand tithing. At least he didn't, from our understanding, he didn't.
Yeah.
And so we had some good conversations with Kirk.
He was awesome.
We had to keep our eye on our money as it was going,
Yeah.
Well, I admire you using money as a tool rather than something that you're worshiping. If you were to describe the ideal world of we're giving to the causes that we enjoy, we're traveling, what does that look like? What makes you fulfilled? Is it a specific cause? Is it just the ability to give in its entirety?
It's the ability to give. It's the ability to be led or to see a need and be able to write a check for it, and it's just not money, giving. We're talking about finances today, but when you have a generous heart and God begins to deal with you, it's your time, it's your treasure, it's your what's the third one? Your talent. Everything you have is we're stewards over what God has given us, and to be able to give. I think for me, we have different causes, of course, that we love. We love the local church. We love all the organizations that are doing something to be a blessing to people. I love World Vision, Compassion. There's a lot of people that we give to. But so I think it's just the ability to be able to, without batting an eye, don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
I understand. Well, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. So I'm going to hit you with some quick hitting questions. Maybe they won't be quick answers, but we'll see.
Okay.
All right. So I want to ask you all a question separately. What is one financial trait that you would like, a behavior that you exhibit, something that you do well in financially that you would like to pass on to your next generation?
That's easy. I think just like you said, giving, the understanding and the principle of giving is something that, we both feel strongly about, and we have seen the blessings that come from it. So I would definitely say, if I was to tell anybody right now about their finances, I say, make sure you give.
Okay. If there was one financial behavior that you could leave on the shelf and make sure that they don't get, Do you have any of those?
Yeah. I mean, when we look back over our lives, we should have cared about it sooner. Savings.
Yeah, saving.
Savings is something that we weren't great at, even though, and that's the thing, a lot of times we feel, at least I shouldn't say we, I can say we, talking about me and you, but a lot of times we feel that it's not necessary because you have everything you need. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But those disciplines that we have in place now, we definitely should have had them in place earlier. Because we would have more. We would have more to give, more to leave whenever it's our time to go, And I don't know if I'm answering this question right, but basically the way we've handled savings in the past, we don't want them to take that. We want them to do better.
Hey, I say pay yourself.
Pay yourself. Pay yourself. I guess they say pay yourself first, but pay yourself after the Lord. Pay yourself second.
No, you can do the Lord first.
Okay, last question. You all have both attained a high level of success in your industries and your faith. If you were talking to someone in any industry at the start of their career, regardless of their career of choice, what advice would you give them?
Easy. And that would be, I could give them a lot of advice, but if it's one, your relationship with the Lord matters. Mm-hmm. It has made all the difference in the world in my life, not because I sing gospel music. It's made all the difference in the world in my life, in my marriage, with my children, all my relationships, with my success. Being in Him brings you good success. The Bible says that if you meditate on the word day and night, He talks about how you will have good success. Don't let the word of God depart from your mouth, because I know a lot of successful people from the world standards that don't have peace. Mm-hmm. They don't have those things that money can't buy, right. Mm-hmm. And my relationship with the Lord has enriched my life in so many ways that money cannot buy.
Not to say the same thing that CeCe said, but we were talking to Marcus yesterday, and we found out that budgeting is something that we had never done very much of. It's almost like we had what we needed, and we just moved on, but never sat down and really said, okay, we're going to put this aside for this and this aside for that, and really start categorizing where we want to put our money, except for tithing. We didn't talk about savings very much, but we tithe, and then we made sure we had paid our bills. And what was left over was just
not investing, not allowing your money to really work for you.
And so, that's another thing. We found out that your money could be working 24/7, and that's what people don't realize, is that money is
a tool, like you said earlier.
It's a tool that can take care of you, and it can take care of your next generation. And the Bible says, and put away for your children's children, and that's something that I think we didn't really grow up with, that kind of concept in our homes as we should. Right. It was almost like, do I have enough for myself? And let our kids take care of themselves. But that's not God. God says that we're supposed to leave an inheritance for our children's children. Yeah. And so for us, we were fortunate that our children, our two kids, didn't have tuition aid. We paid for their schooling. We paid for their private schools. And so now they're benefiting because they don't have to put aside money to pay for their student loans to pay for. Right. And I told my son many times, I said, ask how many of your friends here. And he said, Dad, well, you're right, because most of them have tuition that you're paying for. Yeah. So that was one thing that we did with our children to make sure that they can carry on to that same to their children. What we put into them, they can carry that forward.
But your main thing was budgeting.
Budgeting, right. Budgeting and investing. Yeah.
Well, those are wise words, and that's how we'll end it. I appreciate you all. I appreciate your time, your talents, and I appreciate you being guests on the New Money, New Problems podcast. Thank you.
Also, we're honored to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Much success to you too, Brenton.
Thank you. Thank you. From New Money, New Problems, this was the New Money, New Problems podcast, a show for successful professionals searching for the tools they need to navigate financial opportunities and obstacles they've never seen.